how is the build-up? How is the build-up in the Russian media? We would be very keen to understand that also. There in Russia, how are they looking, Prime Minister Modi of India and his visit to Moscow? Fred.
Well, yes, this is a very big deal in the Russian media. They're leading with it. It is a huge visit, and I think India has always had a base of popularity among Russians. I mean, Bollywood movies and so on, and Indian music are, popular, and we're in the Soviet Union, I recall. And there is now, with Russia turning away from the West, there is also a kind of cultural hunger among Russians to find other sources of things to listen to, things to watch. So that's a factor, and so Russians will be paying attention.
Okay, I'm very keen to understand from you, Mr. Denis Monotorov, the first Deputy Prime Minister of Russia. We're showing those visuals, has received our Prime Minister Modi. It's a red carpet welcome, ceremonial welcome there. How do you see this rare gesture? In fact, reportedly, Mr. Monotorov, the Deputy Prime Minister, is going to be accompanying Prime Minister to the hotel from the airport, and it seems to be a rare gesture accorded to a leader. Visiting dignitary.
I think during this visit, the Russians will, as they have there, rolled out the red carpet. There will be many such gestures because they regard this visit as extremely important. And for in a lot of ways, I think mood in the Russian government is that the relationship with India will grow and become permanent. Things like this trade deficit, which were occasioned by a temporary situation, the war, the disruption of global supply chains, I think they want these to be permanent. And so they will be searching for mechanisms for Russian companies, because they do have a huge backlog of rupees that they've earned, for Russian companies to use that, either buying Indian goods or investing in India, and to a lesser extent, I think, getting paid in some foreign currency that they can use, because of course the Russians can't use dollars or euros. That's right out. So different mechanisms have to be found, and I think that will be one of the big topics on the agenda.
I also found, beside everything else, when you said Prime Minister Modi's visit to Russia is a big deal in Russian media, I think I'm going to, can we have Ambassador Chakrabarti Fees with us? A quick comment from him. Ambassador Chakrabarti, how do you see this, sir?
Well, as I said earlier, that this we'll have to look at various issues that are on the agenda. One of them, of course, is the trade issue, the issue of how to pay, whether it will be a range of currencies, because the dollar cannot be used. I think those are some of the, what shall I say, nuts and bolts of the relationship that will be sorted out. I would be surprised if some defense deals are done, because Russia has been a major defense partner for India, and maybe in space, and then again in the nuclear field. So these are the broad areas on which I think the talks will be held. And also, I think there is clearly a greater number of people visiting, each other's country. So there could be some other, things like a new consulate somewhere, and so those are the kind of things. But essentially, the message is that India is going to continue with its relationship with Russia,
right?
Because of many factors, and one of them being the China factor.
Correct. Yes. India has a strong dependence, Professor Gulshan, on Russia for defense supplies. I mean, if you could call it dependence. But Moscow having supplied at least 60% of the India's weapons purchases in the last 2 decades. And do you see this volume swelling up in the defense sector? This is a critical arm as far as both nations are concerned.
Well, traditionally, India has been one of the main importers of Russian armaments. And there are possibilities that will continue to be, despite the fact that India is diversifying away from Russia. So we are buying from the US, from Israel, from France and from other countries. But as India's defense spending has also gone up, So India will continue to buy from Russia for 2-3 reasons. One is that cost factor, because some of those platforms are relatively cheaper from Russia. Similarly, many of our armed forces are quite used and they are quite reasonably happy with the way things are happening. So that I think will continue despite the fact that we'll continue to buy from other sources as well. So there are issues, I mean at least there are concerns that since Russia is now for the last 2 years busy with the Ukraine war, to what extent Russia would be able to spare those supplies to us, whether it will be able to continue. But I think so far my understanding is that many of those supplies are continuing, even spare parts, etc. There hasn't been a major disruption so far. And I think Russia has also ramped up the production in the last 2 years now. So those defense deals, whether they are going to announce any new deal, that's unlikely.
A defense deal at this point? It's going to be big.
It's unlikely.
Okay.
At maybe some kind of, I would say, logistic agreement, etc., is possible, because defense deal, perhaps Russia, perhaps at this point of time, is not really, I would say, will have that much to spare, perhaps for other countries. The new deals.
Okay.
At the same time, I don't think India would like to give this kind of message now to the West as well, as we are having kind of tightrope.
Okay, I'll just interrupt you here for a second, and I would request Fred Weir and Ambassador Chakrabarti to kindly stay with us as we quickly go across to our colleague Jessica Taneja joining us live from Moscow. I think she's joining me on phone line. Jessica, over to you. Well, Prime Minister was received a while back by the first Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Denis Monotarov, and this is a rare gesture. What do you read in it?
Absolutely, and you saw the guard of honor that was given to the Prime Minister, Sakal, and it's been a grand welcome. And what's more is the welcome here for the Prime Minister at the Hotel Ritz-Carlton. We're given to understand that the Indian community here is waiting to welcome him here, not just inside the hotel premises, but also outside. There are hundreds gathered right now to see the Prime Minister because he'll be here anytime soon. So that would be a spectacle to watch for as his travel to Moscow begins. Crucial meetings lined up in the evening, and he will be meeting the Russian President Vladimir Putin towards the evening, and that will be a state dinner that has been planned for him, where the restricted level of talks would take place today evening. But the mood here on the ground is absolutely static. There are children waiting to greet him, including the vast majority of Indian diaspora who have come out on the streets to welcome the Prime Minister.
Okay, Jessica, we are also joined by Fred Weir from Moscow, senior journalist who's covered India for Russia and vice versa. He says that for the Russian media there, this visit is huge. It's a big deal, quote unquote. What have you been sensing? What are you gathering there? Kremlin's expectations setting from India, and this is going to be the top story for the next 2 days, I believe.
Absolutely, not just the Russian media, but you see the interest of the global media as well as to what really pans out in this meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. There have been a host of issues that are under speculation, but for the moment we do know that there will be delegation level talks as well separately to look at a lot of issues and hold discussions, look at the progress in various other initiatives that the two have undertaken, talking about nuclear cooperation, defense deals, as well as diversifying economic trade beyond defense and energy. So certainly the Prime Minister will have a really packed schedule here, and all eyes will be on the two leaders as these discussions move forward, and the global media is watching.